Separating fact from fiction when it comes to Deion Sanders and Arizona, Colorado preview with a prediction.
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for giving it Locked On Wildcats. I'm your host, Mike Luke. This show is brought to you today by Game Time. Today's episode, again, brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Okay, Arizona, Colorado is here. We're going to get into this game in a few minutes. Going to give you all my thoughts. But first, we'll talk about Deion Sanders. Not that Deion Sanders really cares what I think, but here's where it's at. My problem with Deion Sanders has always been very straightforward in that Deion loves to preach accountability. Deion loves to be able to say, I'm a leader of men. I do this, I do that. Look at me. And, then throw out a Bible verse as he's saying, look at me some more. My problem, though, with Deion Sanders has always stemmed from the Shiloh Sanders situation. Now, for people that don't remember, Deion Sanders told a security guard when Shiloh Sanders was in high school to go, or told the security guard to go get Shiloh Sanders' phone. Well, he went to go try to get his phone, and Shiloh Sanders rearranged the guy's head and left him with life-altering injuries to the point where Shiloh lost a $12 million judgment. And this has basically been upheld by 5 different investigating agencies. Everybody that investigated it blamed Shiloh. And Deion initially blamed Shiloh as well. But guess what happened? After it came out that he might have to pay a lot of money, Deion then changed his story. Deion then said that, that this guy was, Shiloh wasn't really in the wrong in that regard, and that the security guard, I don't know what really happened. So Deion Sanders, the one who says he's a leader of men, who throws out Bible verses, who loves to talk, in those ways, says, well, the second that something hits the fan, Deion's nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, then, after the kid says that he can't pay the $12 million judgment, yet he's walking around with Louis bags and saying he needs to spend $50,000 in cash, Deion is nowhere to be found for the security guard then. The security guard which sustained life-altering injuries. That's my problem with Deion Sanders, is that he loves to talk about being a leader, loves to talk about being this, being that, but when something really hits the fan, Deion Sanders is absolutely nowhere to be found. And again, he's told Colorado fans this as well, that he says he's a leader of men, that he's not going anywhere. Deion Sanders is leaving after the season. Deion Sanders is about Deion Sanders. And again, you can believe all the Bible verses, this and that. He's also the one that goes after people on Twitter, making fun of their stats, things like that. But the Shiloh Sanders thing, I think, was just, and how this has all transpired, has just been a very, very good indication, I think, of the character of Deion Sanders. Okay, now, let's talk about on the field then. When it comes to Colorado's kind of meh. Now, listen, they could easily beat Arizona this week. I don't think anybody would be surprised by that. Arizona has been a massive disappointment under Brent Brennan. There's no way, there's no real other way to put that. But the Deion Sanders was a hire that made if you're a school like Colorado and you have next to nothing going for you, then it's a good hire to make. Now, keep in mind, in the last 20 years, Colorado football has finished ranked once. Colorado basketball has finished ranked once. It's about as bad as it gets when you look at around the landscape of college athletics. Neither one of these programs matter at all. You bring in Deion Sanders, and all of a sudden, you get the casual person, the Colorado fan that is not really a Colorado fan, but he's just intrigued by Deion and everything that he brings to the table. You bring all of those people in. All those people that just came in for Deion, they'll be gone the second that Deion leaves. Period. That's going to be the way it is. But for right now, Arizona is in the spot where that Colorado's got a lot of talent. Offensively, at the wide receiver position, I think it's probably the deepest team or deepest wide receiver unit in the country. Listen, I know that Ohio State, where, you've got 2 first-round picks, obviously, but I think at Colorado, what makes it a little bit different is besides Travis Hunter, you then have Jimmy Horn, you then have LeJohntay, you have LeJohntay Webster, you have Shepard, you have, heck, when Omarion Miller, who's out now, is your 4th best wide receiver, that is a real issue for an opposing team. So you got to keep that one in play. That's going to be the matchup of the game for Arizona, in my opinion. You have got to be able to find out how exactly, if you're Arizona, how are you going to be able to defend this? Because again, you're already missing Traden Stukes. You're already missing Gunnar Maldonado. Tacario Davis is banged up. You got to be able. This is going to be an interesting one to start off with. Now, Tacario Davis is going to be a big matchup for him. I know that he's banged up and everything, but if you're Arizona, you need him to play, and you need him to be able to play very, very, very well. And this is going to be a game where I think you got 18 NFL scouts here. A lot of people are going to be watching this game. So you got to be able to keep that. You got to be able to, and I think Tacario Davis understands that. I would be stunned if he doesn't. And we'll see. Now, the one thing with Tacario Davis, you would very much like him to be able to get some interceptions. And the ball hits you in the hands, go ahead and catch it. But either way, he's a really good player. Then after that, you got Marquise Groves Killebrew, you got Emmanuel Carnley. These are going to be tough matchups for these guys. These are going to be very, very tough matchups. Now, there's a way that I think Arizona can counteract some of this, and we're going to talk about that here shortly. But that passing game is legitimate. There's no doubt about it. There's no way around it. That passing game is legitimate. And Shedeur Sanders is about as good a quarterback as there is in the country. Shedeur is an awesome quarterback. There's, like I said, he's a stud. If you give him time, he's going to absolutely pick you apart, and he's got good chemistry with those wide receivers, and they all kind of move on the same wavelength. So from a skill position perspective, when it comes to quarterbacks, when it comes to wide receivers, they're loaded. But there's also a lot of parts of their offense that is not loaded. Now, at the running back position, you're probably going to go with Isaiah Augustov, who Arizona looked at. He's better than Charlie Offerdahl or Dallin Hayden. That was a big problem going into the year, is that I think that Colorado people thought that Charlie Offerdahl and Dallin Hayden were going to be good enough. They weren't. If they can't really run the ball, and that's why I think that you're looking at a different situation at this point. Neither one of those guys really are that good. So there is that. But so if you don't have to worry about the running game, that's something that Arizona can use to his advantage. And I would imagine that Dwayne Akina is going to do just that. I think on the offensive line, we'll get to the offensive line in a second, but you're going to be able to pin your ears back to a certain degree and just kind of go after him. And if you're Arizona, that's, I think, what you pretty much have to be able to do. So we're going to see how that one does play out. Now, there are going to be a few ways that they're going to be able to, that I think Arizona is going to be able to go after the quarterback. And again, the offensive line for Colorado, while I guess a little better than last year, still isn't very good. I mean, you look at the Nebraska game, you look at the Nebraska game, you look at the Kansas State game. Shedeur Sanders gets hit. Shedeur Sanders gets hit a lot. Now, those are teams with better fronts than Arizona, but I've been pleasantly surprised by Arizona's front this year. I've had really no real problems with what I've seen, and this is going to be a game where they're going to have to really pin the proverbial ears back and then go after them. That's going to be where I think it's going to be very fascinating to see how Arizona does play this one out. Watching these teams, though, I think the other thing is that there's got to be somebody that really, I think, kind of emerges in this game. Could this be a game where Chase Kennedy really emerges? Could this be a game where, Trey Smith, who's been solid, or up front, Isaiah Johnson, can he penetrate the middle? This is going to be a huge game for the defensive line. The defensive line has got to be able to play well, and they got to be able to get after him. And Dwayne Akina is an aggressive defensive coordinator. He is not the kind of guy that just wants to, let the game happen and have them come. Let them come after him. He wants to be able to go after it, and I think you're going to see a lot of that. So, that's one thing I think from an Arizona perspective that I think you're really hoping to see is, an aggressive defense. And if you're an aggressive defense, then I think it makes things a little bit easier because, again, if you just let if you just let Deion Sanders do his thing, then he's going to absolutely destroy you. And that's going to be a massive problem for Arizona. So you got to be able to figure that one out. You got to be able to get after him. And I think Arizona's got the guys that can actually go ahead. And I think Arizona's got the guys that can do that. So you're going to have to be able to put him on his back. We're going to continue to talk about that and what other ways, including going over to the offense. But first, game time. All right, here's the deal with game time. If you got pick an upcoming event, or you got an upcoming event coming up here, take the guesswork out of buying tickets at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Again, all kinds of really good stuff. You get seat views. You can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. The lowest price is guaranteed on Game Time. Will credit you 110% of the difference. Download the Game Time app. Use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Go to Game Time again. Everybody's using it. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now let's talk a little bit about, I don't know, where we are with, let's talk a little bit about where we are then. That's what Arizona's defense needs to be able to do. They got to be able to get after him. If they can get after him, then I think that you can see a different situation. Okay, now, on the offensive side, Arizona's got to be able to get touchdowns in this game. I mean, that's really what this kind of comes down to. Arizona's actually moved the ball fairly well, but they've got to be able to get touchdowns. You've got to stop settling for field goals when you're getting the ball at the 7 or the 8 yard line. And a big part of that starts with being able to run the ball. Now, I think the first thing though is that Noah Fifita, love Noah Fifita. Like I said many times, I put far more of this on the coaching staff than I do on Noah Fifita because I don't believe Noah Fifita just all of a sudden forgot how to play football. Matter of fact, I know he didn't just forget how to play football. So with Noah Fifita, first thing is you've got to stop doing the thing where you're backtracking, where you're snapping the ball at the 4 and you're throwing it at the 17. That's just not going to work. You got to stop doing that. And if you stop doing that, I think that you can be in some better shape. Now, I think some of it too is that I really don't know to this point what this coaching staff is doing. And listen, Matt Adkins is definitely better than Dino Babers. Dino Babers was an unmitigated disaster. I don't know how else to put that. Dino Babers was an unmitigated disaster. He is the guy that the game had just clearly passed him by and he didn't get it. They weren't even moving the ball. At least with Matt Adkins, they're moving the ball. So there is that. But you have got, again, repeat it, you have got to be able to throw the ball and get it downfield. Now, you could say that some of that's on Noah, and I would agree with that because there have been plays that he's missed. But Noah looks uncomfortable. And again, I put that on the coaching staff. I just do. When I watch a player like that is so cerebral, that looks like he's having such a difficult time, you kind of wonder what exactly is going on there. I think that is the problem that that Arizona fans are dealing with is what exactly is going on there. I don't know the answer to that. That's where it's kind of frustrating, I think, that he just looks uncomfortable. He looks like he just isn't really in the same element. And I think that's where, if you're an Arizona fan, you want to see that kind of be rectified. And again, get T-Mac going again. T-Mac's putting up a lot of yards, but it doesn't feel like T-Mac. It doesn't feel like T-Mac last year where T-Mac was jumping around, having fun, being a happy-go-lucky kid, things like that. It just doesn't really feel the same. And, it feels like he's having more of a frustration. And I think that's where something too that's also a little bit frustrating from an Arizona perspective is we've seen happy T-Mac. We know what happy T-Mac looks like, and this hasn't been happy T-Mac. And so get him going again. And I think that's something that Arizona really, really needs to get is if you can get that passing game going, then I think a lot of things kind of start to fall into place, but you got to be able to punch it in the red zone. If you don't punch it in the red zone, then I think that if you're Arizona, this is going to be a tough game because Colorado is going to score. There's no doubt that Colorado is going to score. Not only is Colorado going to score, this is going to be a situation where you also know that they can score points and they can score points in a hurry. So you got to be able to figure that one out. Now, from an Arizona perspective, then running the ball, their offensive line has to be good. The offensive line, there's been too much regression this year. Listen, Jonas Savaiinaea has been absolutely fantastic. Obviously, there's a lot to like about Jonas Savaiinaea. He's a stud. But Wendell Moy, a player like that, he's taken a big step back. And again, I'm going to put that on the coaching staff. I don't believe that Wendell Moy just forgot how to play football. I just don't believe that. So that's something that I think that you've got to take into account if you're Arizona. How are we at this point where players are not doing well? That's, I think, on the coaching staff. Now, another thing, Kean Burnett. You have got to get Kean Burnett the ball. I don't care. The Sam Olsen obsession is odd. You have got to stop trying to force the ball to Sam Olsen. You have got to give the ball to Kean Burnett. Kean Burnett has been shown to be the one other receiving threat on this team. That's just the way it is. Kean Burnett has to be able to get the football. And he's got to be in there. He's big. He's fast. We've seen it before. He can just do a lot of different things. And, Montana Lamonius Craig, he had a pretty good game against Colorado last year. Maybe it's his homecoming. Maybe it is. But the passing game has got to be good, and you can't turn the ball over. That has been Arizona's bugaboo, is that they've been turning the ball over left and right. And when they're getting into the end zone, bad plays. I mean, that BYU game, that game was essentially over before it started almost because, obviously Noah Fafita threw the really tough pick. And then after that, it was just kind of all downhill from there. Arizona has got to get past that. If you get past that, then I think maybe you look at it and you're like, okay, well, they're moving the ball a little bit. But somebody's also got to emerge. It's the other thing, too, that it feels like Arizona just has not had splash plays this year. Big plays, big chunk plays where all of a sudden, like every drive for Arizona, especially those first drives, are generally 13 play drives, but those drives are okay. But at the end of the day, you're also dealing with a lot of 3rd and 4s, a lot of 4th and 1s, things like that. Sooner or later, you don't get those 3rd downs. And that's something that Arizona has just been dealing with pretty much all season. They aren't getting the quick touchdowns. Now, again, not every drive is going to be a quick touchdown. I get that, but they're just not getting any of those. And I think that's where it's becoming very frustrating because in college, it's kind of like what Mike Stoops used to say. He said, the bend but don't break, because eventually college kids are going to mess up. And so far, that's kind of been I think that's kind of been the case. It's kind of been the mantra for Arizona football. So there's that. With this unit, though, this is a team, though, that should be able to strike fast. I mean, again, a guy like T-Mac, that's good. This is a big game for him. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Do they actually match Travis Hunter up with him? A lot of Colorado fans are like, Travis, he only had 2 catches for 9 yards on Travis Hunter. That's because they hid Travis Hunter from him. So, I mean, I guess I give you credit for keeping him away from T-Mac, but no, I'm not going to give you any credit for that one. But T-Mac's got to have a monster game. There's going to be a lot of NFL scouts there. They all know what time it is, and they know that, T-Mac's been a guy that in big spots has performed very well over the years. So there's certainly that, and there's certainly that you could keep that in mind. But I'm saying minimum 31 points. I'm saying that's what Arizona's got to get. They got to get a minimum of 31 points. And then you let the rest fall where you may, but you're also going to have to force some turnovers. Now, one thing that I think is interesting in all of this, and we're going to talk about this in just a second, but one thing that I do think is a little bit interesting in all of this is where the betting lines are, and we're going to talk about that here in just a second. But first, FanDuel. All right, here's the deal with FanDuel, everybody. Check it out. FanDuel. Okay, listen. Here's the deal. You'll get started with a $200 minimum, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game and you check the latest stats, view live play-by-play, that's where you're going to want to go. FanDuel. Excuse me. Check it out at FanDuel.com. You can bet in-game. You can bet before games. Heck, you can bet futures. You can get involved in a lot of different things. Check it out, though, with FanDuel. The great thing, too, about FanDuel is your money's good. Your money is secure, and you got to like it you have got to like it a ton. So check it out, FanDuel. The great thing about it as well is that with FanDuel, like I said, they're there to help you. They're there to facilitate what you're looking to do. And again, you got college football, you got college basketball, you got the NFL, you got the NBA, both basketballs right around the corner. Check it out at FanDuel.com. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now, let's talk a little bit about the betting lines, because this is where it gets a little interesting for me. If you look at the betting lines, Arizona has stuck at basically 3.5. Now, I think a lot of people are like, well, Arizona's got a lot of injuries. They haven't what exactly is that? And I think a lot of this comes down to the Vegas doesn't think that Colorado's very good. And not only does Vegas not think Colorado's very good, I don't think that they view this as a game where that Arizona should lose, because they're trying to get you to bet on Colorado. That's what that line says. That's what's kind of interesting to me. Arizona's missing a lot of their DBs. Again, you already have Traden Stukes out for the year. You have Gunnar Maldonado out for the year. You're going to be playing some younger guys, but Vegas clearly thinks Arizona's going to win this game. Now, what do you chalk some of that up to? Maybe playing in the Big 12. I can see that because, on the road, it's difficult to win in the Big 12. We've definitely seen that. In the Big 12, you've got a bunch of guys that are a bunch of places where, it's a tough home field. I'm not going to say that Arizona's a tough home field, because it's not, but it is sold out. How many of those are Colorado fans? I don't know. But I do think that is an interesting part in all of this, is that that line is not moved. And generally, it's like go against Vegas at your own will. And that's kind of where I'm at with this one. Had this line feels like it should be closer, but I think a lot of that is the home field advantage. And I think a lot of it, too, is that maybe Vegas views Arizona as not being as bad as it's shown. Now, you could make a joke out of that and say, be that as it may, maybe that is the case. I don't know. But this is still the same team, though, that has a ton of high-end talent. I mean, you got 3 possible first-round picks. You've got guys, like I said, that can play. Getting Jacob Manu back as well is big. Now, I still think the targeting rule that Arizona succumbed to against BYU is one of the dumbest things I've ever seen, but it is what it is at this point. Arizona, though, I think that I look for this to be a close game, and I think that's why all of this is very intriguing, because this does feel like the spread should be a little bit different. I am curious to see if Travis Hunter actually plays or not. Now, Deion said he was going to play, but as we talked about at the beginning of the show, there's reasons why I will never believe Deion. Again, maybe Travis Hunter does play. We'll see. But I also don't necessarily take Deion's word for it. So there is that. But if Travis Hunter doesn't play, that's obviously a huge loss for Colorado, because, Travis Hunter is probably the best player in college football. And if he's not, he's one of the top 2 or 3, and you can't really replicate that. Then when it comes to, the defense, like I said, it's that defense is very hit or miss. It's better, like on paper, it's talented, but there's not a lot of NFL talent on that defense outside of it. Plus, you got Shiloh Sanders coming back. That's a good thing for Arizona, because Shiloh Sanders is probably one of the handful of worst safeties in the entire country. This is obvious. He's obviously playing because he's Deion Sanders' kid. He's Deion Sanders' kid, and that is what it is. But you saw against Kansas State that he's not good. And teams will pick on him. I would hope that Arizona will pick on Shiloh Sanders. We'll see. That's certainly something that you should do. If you know that somebody's not good, then you need to go after him. So that could be a good thing for Arizona. All right. As far as the prediction goes, I'm going to go Arizona 34, Colorado 31. This is a game where if you're Arizona, you just want to win. If you just win, then you can look ahead and you're like, all of a sudden you're like, all right, well, you got Cincinnati, you got UCF after that. Maybe you start to string some stuff together. 4-3 is a lot different than 3-4. But if Arizona loses, then I think you start looking at it and you're like, all right, well, this could be a very long season where Arizona might not even become bowl eligible. And that would be the most Arizona thing ever, to come into a season with massive expectations and basically just kind of drop to the floor. So we will see. But this very much feels like a crossroads game. And honestly, it feels like a crossroads game for both teams, because if Colorado loses, then you got a schedule coming up where they could lose some games as well. Plus, with Colorado, you always have to worry about some of the infighting, players blaming each other, things getting ugly. And I think that could certainly be the case as well. So we're going to find out about all of that. So, and then we'll be back on the post-game show, obviously, and we're going to get into some Arizona basketball as well. As you all know, Arizona is a top 10 basketball program in the entire country. They're checking in at 10, so that's going to be something fascinating. We're going to be talking about that pretty much all week as well. But as always, very, very much appreciate you all making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Mike Luke. Again, Arizona 34, Colorado 31. Bear down, back the A, and we will be back with you. Thanks for keeping it Locked On Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day.